let's look at how we put a human in the loop when it comes to our autonomous custom agents that we build with Copilot Studio. So in a previous video, I built an agent for responding to my emails. And one of the feedbacks I kept getting was, hey, I don't want this to send a response to my emails, but I wanted to queue those up so I can review them, fix them, and do that, right? So save as draft. Now, save as draft is not a built-in action in Copilot Studio or Power Automate. So I had to kind of go to the drawing board and figure out how to do that. And so it turns out it is possible using the Graph API. I know that sounds super scary, and it will not be scary. We'll make this super easy for you, but we're going to kind of look at how we would do that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate that into my existing agent so you can see how that goes. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that don't work the way that you might expect, bugs, and just so you can kind of get an idea so you don't trip over those the same way that I had to. Sounding fun? Then let's switch over to my desktop and take a look. Okay, so here's my buddy bot, right? The one that responds to my emails. We'll talk about it more when we come in here to adjust what it does. But I just want to show you if I go to actions here and then add an action. And then if we search for Office 365 Outlook, like we could go through all these, but there's no create a draft in here, right? Like, so this is where you get frustrated. Well, I just want to create a draft. Me too. So I want to show you they weren't there. Now we know that all these actions though that Copilot Studio uses are the same actions that Power Automate and Power Apps use, right? That's one of those great things what we have going for us is that, our skills translate. In this particular case, I wanted to figure out how to send a draft email, which I had never done before. I guess create a draft email, whatever, you know what I mean? And so I'm not going to start here, right? Like Copilot Studio is newer to me. It's got a lot more moving parts. Like I want to go and learn easy and then apply it over here. So anytime I have to do something like this, like every single day, just about, what I actually do is go over here, open up a new tab, check out the new Microsoft template with Clippy, woohoo! And then I go over here to flow. And what we're going to do here is create a new flow. We're just going to do a instant cloud flow and we're going to manually trigger it. All right, we'll give it, we don't care what the name is. We're just gonna say create. Okay, so this to me is the easiest place to start. I'm very comfortable here. I'm gonna learn how to do this new action here, and then we'll go apply it there. So also like when I'm over there, I'm trying to figure out like, what does that action want? I come to flow. Like I use flow a lot in hand with Copilot Studio to do what I wanna do. Okay, so we'll go over here, we'll say add an action. And so then here, what I'm looking for is those same Office 365 Outlook. So we'll search for Outlook. There's Office 365 Outlook, see more, and I'm not going to read them all to you, but basically just create a draft is not here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say send an HTTP request. Now, and while this is running, I want to point out that Brett in the Portland user group, he's kind of the guy that got me thinking about this. He kind of dropped the right little hints, maybe even told me exactly what to do, and I just didn't comprehend it. But anyway, shout out to Brett. Brett kind of redirected me here. So send an HTTP request. This only works with the Outlook ones, but it is free, so it's not going to be a premium action. But it only works on a certain piece of the Outlook puzzle. And so now you're like, hey, well, what do I need to put in there? So what I did was I basically just went and asked Copilot, like, hey, how would I do that? So I'll go over here, and then from Copilot, let's just try something like, let's try this. Using a Power Automate Cloud Flow, how do I create an Office 365 Outlook HTTP action that creates a draft email? So hit enter. And notice I always give it that extra context, like where I'm going to go do this. So it's putting me off onto the right place. And if you're really unsure what to do, like you can just follow the steps, create a new flow, add the action, configure the action. And so it's like, all right, here's the endpoint you want to use. All right, so let's just grab this, copy. We'll switch back over here. We'll paste that in. I saw there the method is going to be a post, right? And if we're over there, right, we'll just confirm that. Oh, yep, there's the word post. So we know post is there. And then it's like, all right, in the header section, you're going to need authorization bearer access tokens. We don't need this. So that is a mistake on its part because using the built-in Power Automate flow action, it handles all the auth for us. We can skip that. We will need the content type application JSON, but I think if we look over here, it's pre-specified that it's a default configuration. Perfect. And then ultimately, if we scroll down here in the body, so it's like, hey, if you use this body, this should make what you're looking for. All right, so copy that. And then we'll go here and we'll say, all right, do I have a body? We have custom headers. I don't want that, but there's a body. Click out. And so in the body, this would need to be well-formed JSON. Now, if HTTP actions, APIs make you super uncomfortable, go watch the video up there. I've got a step-by-step that gets you more familiar with them. Like anyone who's doing Power Apps, Power Automate, Copilot Studio, you want to have some familiarity with JSON and APIs. Like this is just normal business these days. Like remember, I'm not a pro dev. I've never written any fancy C# code. Like I barely know what all this stuff is, but I've learned it enough that I can fill in all the blanks correctly, which is what I need from you guys too. Okay, so if we look at this, it's like, all right, I'm gonna send this something subject, your subject here, body, your email content here, to recipients, recipientexample.com. All right, you know what? We could start tweaking this, but I just want to see if it works. So all we're going to do is we're going to hit save. Felt like it took 12 years, but it finally did. And then now all we're going to do is test. That's the beauty of using the manual trigger. I don't have to do nothing. I don't have to go over into my agent, add instructions. Like we can just quickly see, does this work? I think it's going to work, but who knows? We'll find out in a second. All right, we'll continue here. We'll run the flow and we'll say we're done. And after a few seconds, it says our flow ran successfully. So let me go look at my drafts folder. And da-da, sitting in my drafts folder, right? Your subject here, your email content here, and to that weird email address, all good. So look, we now know how to generate a draft email. High fives. Right? Some of you are like, that's all I need. Bye. Well, make sure you like the video before you leave. But anyway, you can go bye. Okay? So now that we've got that, let's switch back over. Okay, so if we hit edit, so we know that this, right, body is all that matters. So then now what we do, right? We need to do inputs here. So, we'll make the subject, the body, and the to line here dynamic inputs, and then we'll be able to, fill in the blanks dynamically as we want. Oh, perfect, right? Now, if I look at this, I'm like, all right, cool. We could keep playing, but like that was a big problem I want to solve. Could I do this? The same thing if you're thinking, can I do BCC or CCs or importance or attachments? Yes, right? The answer is yes to all those. You just need to go talk to Copilot to talk to about how to change the JSON. Like we're not going to go down those rabbit holes, but you could do all that. Okay. So what we are going to do is we're going to kind of think about going back over here. So what we want to do is we want to now, instead of with our instructions, we know that this thing today sends an email using the send an email action. And so instead we want it to send a draft. Now, if I'll tell you something here, right? If you go here to actions and add an action and search for Office Outlook, in here is the send an HTTP request. So you're like, all right, well, let's go use that and configure it. Unfortunately, that action's kind of, can I say broken? I'm gonna say broken. Basically, it doesn't understand how to do the body. It has the body parameter, but it thinks it's a file instead of text. And so best I can tell so far, I can't make it work. So I've given up on it. So what we're going to do instead of adding this action and configuring it, which is what I wanted to do, it's all right. If it doesn't work there, if we can't figure out how to use one of these actions, we always have the ability to do a new flow. So we're going to just build that same flow over here, and then we'll be able to take advantage of it. So we're going to say new flow. Now, while this is provisioning, you might be saying, well, Shane, why don't you just take the flow that's over there and change it so we can just use it? Hey, I've got a Copilot Studio Jumpstart class, like a whole day of just learning how to build autonomous agents and conversational agents. Step by step, we're going to build them. We're going to learn about them. We're going to learn all the tricks that I've learned, all the tuning things, all the things we can do to make them run better, turning off stuff, troubleshooting, you name it, we're going to do that. So just jump over to training.powerapps911.com. We've got some training classes over there. You'll see the link to join that class, and I hope to see you there soon. So technically you can, but it takes about 5 more little steps. And I didn't want this video to get too far off track. So if you really want me to explain how to take an existing flow and make it show up in Copilot Studio, leave a comment below. It would be its own video. I mean, it's totally possible. It's just a bunch of extra hoops that I don't want to jump through in this video. Okay. So now we've got the basis of a Power Automate flow. Let's go up and give this thing a nice name like video create a draft. Sounds fair to me. So it's got inputs, it's got responses. So we know we want to do here is go into the action and add our piece. Now what I think we can do, let's go back over here real quick. I think I can come back to this guy, right click on it and say copy action. Switch back to the other tab. And then if we right click here and then paste an action. Oh, look, it's just going to bring it over. So this is one of the new things. I know we complain about the new Flow Studio all the time. This is something it does really well. The copying and pasting actions, even between different sessions and different flows. That's pretty nice. Okay, so now that that's all here, what we want to do is we want to kind of reconfigure this a little bit. So I'm going to go up here and run a flow from Copilot. I'm going to add an input, text, and I'm going to call this input 2, and then we're going to add another input, text, and we'll call this one input subject, and then one more. And how about for this one, input body? Now, I left it, I don't know, I did the names. I didn't like using to, subject, and body. I didn't want that to get confused with the fields that were to, subject, body. Like it probably would have been fine, but I don't like to use common words like that. So that's why I did that. But your language might vary. Okay. So now we have these as inputs. We'll go here and we just go in here. And we're like, all right, your subject here, we will delete that out. And then we will go here to our little action dynamic content and be like, all right, input subject. For the body, delete that out. Make sure the cursor is still between double quotes. And then input body. And then last but not least, same thing for the email. So we go here, input to. Okay, so that's all we did, right? Dynamic content. We just filled in the boxes like we would expect. So, and we know that this action works already, and we don't need to send anything back in response. So I feel like we can just go ahead and say publish. Okay, so now that it's published, I want to go through another step that I want you to go to before you go to Copilot Studio. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit back here, right? Because we're still in flow. And so what we needed to look at is our run as user. So if we scroll down here at the bottom right, now you'll see like run only users and a GUID. This is normal. This is kind of like its association with the agent. I don't know, right? We're not worried about it, right? What we're going to do though here is we're going to hit edit. Now, so when we do actions over in Copilot Studio, right, we always have to toggle whether it runs as the user, like in a conversational agent, or if it runs as the Copilot author in an autonomous scenario. But we don't do that for flow over in the agent side. We do that here in the Power Automate side. Oh, I forgot the word I was trying to use. Anyway, so what we want to do before we leave is we want to change this from provided by the run only user, because that would be the autonomous agent, which isn't a user. And we're going to change this to one of my mini Shane at Power App 911 connections. And we're going to say okay here. Now, it's also, you could go ahead and check this if you're going to continue to work on the flow. So that way it would make sure that this was configured right. This is kind of like a after the fact, but if you want to make sure it's configured before the fact, you would change this so we can check it, not check it, who cares? And then we're going to scroll down here and we're going to say save. And if you have multiple connections there, you would have chosen this for each. Now, after this saves, what you're going to need to then do is we're going to go edit the flow and then publish it again as well. Is that always required? I'm not sure, but I can tell you this process gets real finicky. So what I always just do right at this point, we're just going to say edit, click on one of these actions. I'm just going to go in here. I'll like hit the space bar, delete the space, and then now I can publish again. Okay, so this way I'm positive that my flow knows that all these connections are happening as me, not trying to pass them through as the agent. All right, so now that that's finished, I feel much better. Now, I also tell you, if you just saw this and you just have your aha moment of why one of your existing agents isn't working, you're like, hey, if I do all that, that'll fix it. Make sure that after you do all that, you also republish your agent, right? Like I fixed this in one of my versions and I was like, I fixed it, I promise. And the agent kept complaining about authentication. And I'll put the error message that you commonly see when this is the problem up there on screen. But then what happens is I then need to republish the agent so it uses the republish flow so everyone is happy, okay? So just publish is the answer if that comes up to be a problem. All right, anyway, so now that that's done, let's switch back over to our agent and we'll do a little refresh. Now, because we were searching before, it doesn't show. If we X out of the search, sometimes it will show here. It did not show here. All right, I find this a little frustrating. That's all right. All you do, go click on the ellipses here and say flow. And now these are all the different flow actions. And so in here should be my lovely little flow. Now it didn't show up. Normally it shows up right away. Today, for whatever reason, flow's been running a little slow. So in this case, I want to do another refresh. Now, unfortunately, there's not a direct like refresh button here. So typically what I'll do is go get a drink, step away from it. And I'll just come back in here. I'll do new action. I'll do new flow, right? Because this kicks this interface. I don't need any of this. We're just going to X straight out of that. But when you come back over here, now you get the refresh button, right? So that's a way to get the refresh button. And hopefully now that I've waited, a moment or two, it should go. So let's hit refresh again. And now it shows up. Now, like I said, normally this never takes multiple refreshes. Today it is just being a pickle for whatever reason. Pickle, pill, whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay. So now that our video created draft is here, we're going to add this into our flow or into our agent. This is an agent chain. We need to give it a name. We'll just stick with video created draft. No, we won't. We'll change this name to something like create a draft email in the description, use this action to create a draft email based on the actions of the agent, right? Remember, descriptions really matter. Like in this case, it doesn't super matter because this one's pretty direct called, but you want to get in that habit of always giving as best description as you can. So let's go ahead and click add action. Okay, so now we have the flow add as an action in here. So now we want to go into there and we want to configure it. Now this is all good. We've already set all this. And notice the action name is still the flow name, whereas the display name is what we just typed in. So here, if we go to inputs, so now it knows it has 3 required inputs, the 3 that we created. And so now it's like, hey, what goes here? Now, here you then want to do a mixture of whatever makes sense for your particular scenario. Now, in this case, the 2, right, it's always going to be dynamic. So we want this to figure it out for itself. Now, what we want to do here, though, is we want to try to make this as easy as we can. So I'm going to probably take away my little inputs. Now, maybe I'm regretting them. I don't know. I still kind of like that I changed them. But here in the description, I want to focus on a good description. The email address that the email will be sent to. So that seems good to me. If we get it wrong, we'll fix it, right? Subject. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pull off the input for now. And we're going to go here and we're going to set the description. How about fill in the appropriate subject based on incoming email is being responded to? Yeah, seems good to me. And so then the body will probably do something very similar, like fill in the appropriate body based on the incoming email is being responded to. Always use well-formatted HTML. Right? Like I feel like those are solid, but once again, I didn't do this part. Like I worked out how to get the Outlook action working. And so, getting the bot to be happy, we might have to change it up a little bit. We'll see, but we'll go ahead and we'll say save. And so now that we've got this action video created draft, the last little piece of this, right? I'm going to copy that, or this one, copy. We go over here and we're going to edit our instructions because today in our instructions, right, generate an appropriate response based on the context and content of the email and send an email back to the sender as appropriate using the send an email action. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this up to be generate an appropriate response based on the context and content of the email and create a draft of the email as appropriate using the create a draft email action. All right. Like I said, I haven't tested this. That's my first thought of what we would try here. So let's just give it a chance. Like, what's it going to do? Not work? Who cares? Oh, actually, you know what? Before we do that, if I was paying attention to myself, right down here, I've also got another instruction that uses that send an email. So let's update this one, which was when they do training classes, it invokes knowledge. And so let's kind of reword this one a little bit to say something like, right, so same stuff, but and then create a draft email. So we just want to make this one also generate a draft email. So now I think we should be good, so we'll save the instructions. The other thing I'm going to do, because I don't want my agent to have conflicts, right? Like a lot of times we overwhelm our agents with too many decisions to make. So if we go get our actions, we're no longer using a send an email. So I don't want it to even think about that. Even though we didn't tell it not to use it, we don't want it to even have to process it. So we're going to go here into send an email and we're just going to turn this thing off, right? So we'll hit the little status, turn it off. And then if we say save and then go back here to actions, and I guess I could have just flipped off this switch too, but whatever, right? Like you get the idea. I wanted to get rid of send an email. So there's like 4 different ways to do it, but I didn't want to delete it because I might want it again later. All right. So now we can't send emails anymore. We can still forward emails. That's okay. We can still mark them as read and we can create our draft emails. So let's go over to overview. I always hit edit on my instructions. I think they're easier to read when you're in edit mode. Okay. So I feel like all of these things are correct. Good, good, good. Okay. So now we want to go ahead and hit publish. Now the risk here are because it's an autonomous agent, it's using my credentials, that's normal. So let's go ahead and say publish again. All right, now that it's published, we're going to have Chewy send an email. Now you're thinking you could have went down here and used a previous trigger and done this to do a test. I could, but then we wouldn't know what the email said and we wouldn't be sure if it's really doing what we wanted. But remember that you can test the trigger here. So you could use this and you could do this as a test by just saving your agent. But if you want to test it by actually having the action happen, in this case, someone sending me an email, then that scenario, we have to publish first, okay? So since we've published, we're good. So let's switch over to Chewy's browser, right? So this is Chewy's email box. The green is what tells you this is what Chewy is. So we're gonna say new email. We're gonna send it to me. And then the subject, we're gonna set test buddy bot. So I did that in the flow, right? The flow triggers only on emails to me with test buddy bot in the subject, right? So that way it's not responding to all my emails while I'm still testing. So if you're thinking, could you send an email to Shane with Test Buddy Bot and get a response from my agent? Well, you could. Well, actually, you could get a draft response, right? But so now, if we go in here and do something for the body like, hi, Shane, will you please help me figure out the perfect training class for Power Apps and Automate? I want to learn everything and be as smart and as good looking, yeah, right, as you. Thanks, Chewy. Okay, so Chewy wrote this one lovely email. He's going to hit send. And so then, right, that should go land in my inbox. When it lands in my inbox, then the flow will trigger and say, oh, there's an email to respond to because it meets the criteria. It'll send the email over to our agent. And then once our agent has got it, it will then hopefully process it following our instructions and create a draft response to Chewy. So let's switch back over to our agent. Now over here, what we want to do is we want to go to activity. All right, so over here on the activity map, I want to talk about some of the things you see before we dive in. So you see automated and you see some with my name beside them. So this confuses people at first. The key here is that automated, this means that Flow triggered it, right? You see the little kind of quasi-flow icon here, right? That's their way of telling you, like, hey, Flow caused this to run. Like this was an actual automated run. Whereas all these ones with my name beside it, those are all test runs that I have done. So that's why you kind of see a mixed bag there of the two. Now you also notice there's a bunch of them here. Like I've had a bunch of challenges. It's normal, right? But one of the things I also want to show you here, this is like bonus tip. So let's go into this one here that finishes incomplete. So when you look here, you're like, all right, session failed. You see the red here and you're like, but I don't, like, what's the error message, right? Like this is super frustrating. How do I figure out what's going on here? So what you need to do back here on the activity map, you can click on transcript. This will show you like, look, this is the data that got dumped in. And then here is the error. Now in this case, the error was over on my flow side. So I need to go figure out what was wrong with my flow in that particular case, which basically when I showed you guys how to fix the run as, I forgot to like do all the republished dance I told you about. I didn't do it for myself. And so I had to redo that dance. But once I redanced with all the republishing, that's why everything worked, right? But I want you to kind of see like this transcript is not readily obvious, but that's how you see the error messages in these autonomous ones, okay? So let's go back here. So let's look at the good news. And so that is that our run worked. So if we click on automated, wherever that word is, you can see the session started. It got triggered when it got this email in. So you could see the email if you want to make sure it was the right email. It ran a knowledge source because the request was for training. And so that knowledge source had the training in there. So that's how that knew what to do. Then it created the draft email. There's no responses. So there's nothing on this right side. It then marked the email as read, and it just basically said, yep, I did it. And then ultimately it said, create the item in SharePoint, right? And this is back to that agent. We didn't build a lot today. That was the thing I showed you earlier, you know, the whole, like how this thing works, but that is all there. And just to confirm, if we check my drafts, there is my draft email with links in it as well. Perfectamundo, right? So now I put the human in the loop. So now as the human, I can review this email, make sure it's sending what I want. And then I just hit send, you know, obviously you guys know how to do Outlook, so I'm not going to teach you about that. But perfect, right? We have got human in the loop with Copilot Studio, all thanks to this ability to create a draft email, which was, you know, slightly harder than you wanted. But thanks to the power of, you know, regular Copilot giving us the JSON, like it was pretty easy to figure out once I kind of went and asked the question. Speaking of questions, do you have any questions, any comments? Leave them below. I'm always game for answering those. You know, learning to build these agents is a lot, right? There's so much going on. It's changing very fast. So tell me what you're thinking about. Like I said, this one came from Brett just being like, hey, I think you can save his draft using the Graph API. And bingo, bango, now you all can do save as draft thanks to his little comment like that. So please share what you've got with that stuff. Okay. And with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.